Hi again. So I'm sorry for the delay in posting the video. I was a bit occupied with housework things. Actually, there is a lockdown here in Turkey every weekend, but we had an official holiday Thursday, Friday, so there was a lockdown for 4 days, and I needed to do some housework to help out my family. So sorry about the delay. Um, For Thursday, we had two videos to watch. One was called Mexico's Immigrant Oasis, Last Stop Before the Border, and the other one was about was an interview actually made by the founders of Sanctuary Coalition. I want to talk about the Sanctuary Coalition first, and then talk a little bit about Mexico's Immigrant Oasis. So Sanctuary Coalition, it's a coalition that I was working with as well 2 years ago. I worked with them for 2 years. So what they basically do, they do activism around immigration issues. They accompany immigrants who um who have to go to court regularly in Federal Plaza. For those of you who you don't know, Federal Plaza is the place that the immigration courts take place. So what happens is when an immigrant crosses the border, if she faces the police, the immigrant is given a number which is called an alien number. Yeah. And after that process, she needs to go to the court to defend her case not to get deported. Yeah? She needs to go through a credibility test to grant her reasons to cross the border, and then she needs to go to the court. If she is not deported back immediately. And through this process, immigrants need to have lawyers to be better defended, but most of them cannot um, have the money, find the money to have lawyers. So the Sanctuary Coalition accompanies the immigrants to the court to kind of create a visibility around the issue, yeah? Create a visibility in Federal Plaza, saying that these immigrant people, they're not without no one, but we care about their lives, we care about them not being deported. That's one of the things that Sanctuary Coalition does. The other one is something called Clinic. So people from Sanctuary Coalition get together every Tuesday in NYU Laws Building, actually. And immigrants who need legal advice, they come as well. And people from Sanctuary Coalition in 4 or 5, like they form groups of 4 or 5, and you work with someone, undocumented person who needs a legal advice. Then you go over to, for example, if the lawyer who work voluntarily says your group to make an asylum application, then you begin that process. So you work according to the case. So I think Sanctuary Coalition is a very good group that um, aims kind of revealing what is happening in this process of migration and aiming to build a community of solidarity for immigrants. Not a community in immigrants themselves, but a community that includes immigrants as well as American citizens. Or, for example, me, who I'm immigrant, but I have a visa. Yeah. So one of the things that Ravi and Sarah, who are the founders of the coalition, were discussing was this distinction between bad versus good immigrants. Yeah, so they were saying those communities are already marginalized and they get deported if they commit a crime. Yeah, so there is this distinction, even in the Sanctuary Coalition. Sarah was pointing out that there is a bad immigrant and there is a good immigrant. So bad immigrant would be someone who committed a crime and who has like who kind of deserves to get deported. Yeah, and a good immigrant is someone who hasn't committed a crime, therefore he or she deserves to stay. And both of them, Ravi and Sarah, rightfully were discussing actually this distinction further criminalize the community, because the right to stay, the right to not to get deported should be a universal right, as they're saying, and it doesn't depend on the crime that you have committed. Um, because this is very contrary to the way that US government treats its own citizens. Yeah. Um, so if you commit a crime, you do your time in jail and then you get out. But in this case of the immigrant processes, you are kind of labeled as the one who needs to go out, who needs to get deported. Also, I think another important point made by Sarah and Ravi was that this community is marginalized and criminalized, and this kind of furthers the already existing violence or already existing discrimination in the community. If you remember, for example, our discussion on intersectionality, that black women were facing with a double oppression due to gender and race, like systems of inequality, gender and race. Here, actually, same thing happening. For example, women cannot go to the police or hesitant to go to the police if there's a domestic violence in the house. So Ravi was giving an example of a woman who is not able to, who called the police because his husband got violent, but at the end the husband got deported, and that wasn't what the woman wanted actually. So as a result, many women tend to stay silent because they do not want to face deportation, or they do not want their husband's deportation. Yeah. Um, I think that's all I want to say about the Sanctuary Coalition, and I'm open to any question. And in the other video, it's talking about how this immigration issue became a tool of economy or a business actually. So in the video, they're focusing on a little town called Altar near the Mexico border, and you see that there is an economy around this whole passing the border, passing the desert thing. Yeah. So there is 17 hotels that immigrants come and stay. Also, there is shops that sell people what they need, what would they would need in the desert. Also, they were saying that an immigrant has now to pay from 3,500 till on like to $5,000 to cross the border. So at each state, you need a person called transit who better knows the way, and you pay them. But it's so the immigrant is in a very vulnerable place because sometimes they pay and the person doesn't show up, or they say, oh, people are offered to get money to carry wheat, but then they carry the wheat and then they do not get their money, or they do not get transported to the desert, etc. And also another point, so the point is that the priest, if you remember, was saying they don't see the person, but they see the money that they're gonna make. So not only in the US, but also in Mexico, in their own country, that people are being made in a very vulnerable situation, the immigrants who want to pass, because they're spending all their money to to pass the border, and there is no guarantee that they're not going to be made to return, they're not going to be deported. So they become commodities instead of people in themselves. And the priest was kind of calling people to see these people in their humanity, but not instead like as a tool to earn money from. Also, another thing that I wanted to say, which was in the video in the Mexico's immigrant oasis, if you saw the pharmacist, she was saying that 80% of women were getting raped in the desert. So, and this kind of links back to De Leon's points in the book, in the Land of Open Graves, that he was saying, oh, actually, I won't be able to talk about women because women were not very open to me. Since they didn't feel themselves very comfortable with a man. And when I include women's perspective, it's usually through a man talking about what happened, a woman in the desert, yeah? So in this book, we don't get the gendered perspective as much as we should get, but De Leon is very upfront about it, saying like, oh, this is because of the relationship that I, as a person, like due to my cultural and socioeconomic background, that I could establish with my informants, with the immigrants, yeah? So this, I think it's a good point to discuss about the relationship between the ethnographer, between the writer and the informant. Yeah, that relationship influences the way, the end product, the book. Yeah. So if you remember Abu Lugot was talking more about women and the poetry. And she was also explaining in the very beginning how she established that relationship and how that relationship is kind of created thanks to her own background, like her own gender, being a woman. So that's what enabled her to establish relationships with women easier than with men. And in De Leon's case, it's the opposite. Since De Leon is a man, so he was able to establish easier, more intimate relationships with men. And this, I think, kind of ties back to our point of ethnography being a literature or I mean, it's a non-fiction genre, ethnography, yeah, because it is supposed to be based on facts in a way. So the numbers that De Leon is giving us, for example, about migration, or for example, he's talking about real policies that took place, yeah, prevention through deterrence. This is not something that De Leon created in accordance with kind of reality. Yeah, this has happened, but in literature, even if the people and the plot or the narrative, they are in line with what can happen in real life, but things that didn't happen. But in ethnography, the numbers, the data, so a good chunk of the ethnography is based on real things that had happened. But the fictitious character of ethnography, I think, is coming from the fact that it is at the end very much influenced from the perspective of the writer. If you remember, for example, way back in the beginning of the semester, we were talking about Malinowski and how he was kind of claiming to portray people in an objective manner, yeah? But afterwards, we see Abu Lugot and De Leon kind of admitting the fact that the ethnography will be biased, will be filtered through their own perspective. So I think that's one of the ways that ethnography gets closer to literature, that it is actually biased and it is dependent on the person writing the book, the end product. Yeah, so for Tuesday, we're going to do chapter 4 and 5. So they're not very long and they're easy to read. I want to do both of them together. For Thursday, I'm going to decide which chapters that we're going to read. I think we will read one chapter for Thursday. Also, slowly, I want to think about the final paper. I'm going to grade your midterms this week. And if you haven't submitted your midterm, please do. It's okay to submit it late. And I'm going to start thinking about the final paper. I don't think I want you to write 2 essays or 2 questions. I think it's better to do just one, like to take it easy. And I think I will send you the questions towards the end of this week so that you can have a look and start to think about what you want to do, etc. Okay, thank you. See you on Tuesday.